Darren, lovely to have a chat with you today. It's we just said off camera. I'll talk about triathlon all day, and I love it. But I also love hearing what people's journeys into the sport have been. You know, how they got into triathlon, what background they have as well, because so many people come into the sport and they don't necessarily have a background in swim, bike, and run. I came
No.
into the sport from a team sport, and no doubt we'll talk about that in a moment. But what is your journey to date with triathlon?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting one, actually, Andy. And so it started back in 2013. And at the time, I was working in the City of London in a hedge fund, and we were doing a large project. And one of the vendors we were working with said, "Oh, we're doing a company triathlon at one of the biggest ones, which is Blenheim Palace," and said, the company are sponsoring it. Would you fancy entering it? And straight away I said yes, because for whatever reason, I'd always wanted to do a triathlon. I have no idea why, but I always wanted to do one. So the minute I got the opportunity, I was like, yeah, bang, I'll do it. But then, so my theory behind it was that, well, I go to the gym 3 times a week and I eat pretty good, so I'll be fine. And then I started training, and it was a whole different ball game. And it was at that point I realized just how unhealthy I was and how unfit I was, because I jumped in a pool and I couldn't swim one length of a 20-meter pool. Now I could swim, I could do front crawl, but not consistently, right? So that was a big shock. I was like, wow, I didn't expect that. And then there was the running. I jumped on the treadmill. I couldn't even do 7 minutes on the treadmill. And I had to stop, and I had such a burning sensation in my chest. Now I'm asthmatic. So immediately the excuse came out, oh, well, it's because of my asthma, right? Well, it wasn't that. And then the cycling side of it, I'd cycled quite a lot in my kind of late teens. So the cycling side of it was always okay. So then the kind of what happened at that point then, what I couldn't understand is why have I been going to a gym for 15 years, and yet when I tried to train for something specifically, I'm just way overweight and way unfit. And that's kind of what sent me off on this whole discovery, I guess, of understanding, first of all, nutrition, and then a lot more about fitness. And then, so I did all of that, and I got to the first triathlon in Blenheim Palace. I completed it. My main objective for this first triathlon was to get across that finish line. That was it. That was all I wanted to do. Yeah, I did it. I got across the finish line in 1 hour 36, not groundbreaking by any stretch of the imagination. But what happened, Andy, and this sounds a bit like movie-like or a bit cliche, it's like when I crossed that finish line, I had a feeling that I've never experienced in my life before, whether it's all of the serotonin, dopamine, whether it's a sense of achievement. I don't know what it is. I don't really care, in all honesty, but it was just that moment that I was like, wow, I want to do this again. Like, I've gone through all that pain and all the heart, the struggle to get across that finish line. But I was like, wow, I want to do this again. And literally since that day, I have not stopped. I've never, not only last year because of the pandemic, I've not done an event, but I was literally hooked. And, we were talking about just now off of air, and it's finding that thing which lights you up. And it's, we'll go into this, I guess, in some detail, but it's not for everyone, as you said.
Yeah.
But it works for me, and my God, it's completely transformed my life. Like, I don't say that lightly either. And some people use triathlon as kind of a kind of middle class midlife crisis, right? Because it's so popular in our age groups, right? In the 40 plus age group is just crazy popular, but hugely competitive as well. So yeah, but then kind of, I lost a huge amount of weight. So I lost 61 pounds, nearly 28 kilos in weight from doing it. And I just, you know, again, another cliche, but I just got so switched on from an energy perspective, from a mental perspective, from a happiness perspective. It just absolutely transformed my life. And I didn't realize just how kind of foggy, I guess, I was going through life, and how kind of maybe not as happy as what I could be going through life because I was in that state. And it's a classic thing of you don't know what it feels like to feel good until you feel good, right?
Yeah.
And that's then what kind of got me into starting Fitter Healthier Dad, because I want to help so many other people who are perhaps not conscious about what fitness and nutrition can do for them. And, you know, there are so many men in their 40s, you see them, they're trying to run, they're trying to cycle, they're trying to go to the gym, and they're not getting any results. Now, I'm making a big assumption that they're doing it for health reasons, but there's so much misinformation. And obviously, you know, your podcast is perfect to kind of dispel all those myths out there. Because this industry, this fitness and nutrition industry that triathlon exists in, it's just steeped in misinformation. It's steeped in kind of just giving us one bit of information, but not all of it, right? Yeah. And that's what Fitter Healthier Dad's about. It's about a complete, the whole puzzle, if you like, of nutrition, health, fitness, mindset. And it can be way simpler than it's made out to be.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that, because at times I find the industry a little bit like clickbait, in the sense of they give you a tiny little bit of information to sort of say, if you do this, you will be faster, you will be fitter, you will be stronger, you will be bigger in muscle, whatever. And not everyone, but a lot of people out there are looking for those quick wins to get fit and healthy. And unfortunately, to get fit and healthier, it takes the time and effort to put in, and it's a bit of a long game. And interestingly, you say that you used to go to the gym quite regularly, 3 times a week. Can I just ask, what did you used to do in the gym? Because I find a lot of people just go through the motions. They go to the gym, they lift a couple of weights on the machines, they might go on the rowing machine, they lay on the mat and do some stretching. Hour later, they're walking out. Yeah. And my argument always is that people aren't getting enough out of those sessions. Our time is so precious that if you are going to do an hour in the gym, you have to make it work. You have to make it interesting for you, but you have to make it beneficial. Otherwise, you just go through the motions and it doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And that's exactly what I was doing. It's almost like this societal norm, right? If you want to be fit and healthy, you go to the gym. Actually, what do you do when you go to the gym? And what is the reason you're going to the gym in the first place? What is the outcome you want to achieve? And when you talk to specifically guys in their 40s about this, like, oh, you know what? I just need to go to the gym. They actually don't want to think about it, right? They don't want to go, you know, they've got enough kind of stresses and strains in their life. The last thing they want to do is then get their gym plan out, map it all out, and all the rest of it. But unless you go there for a specific reason, a specific purpose, you get nothing out of it. And like I proved for 15 years. Yeah. And the other side to it as well is, again, coming back to my puzzle analogy, it's one piece of the puzzle. If you go to the gym for an hour, and I hate this whole hour thing because you do not need to go to the gym for an hour. It's complete BS. If you do that and then you come out and you go to a Starbucks to get to your lunch, or you go to a Pret a Manger to get your lunch, or McDonald's, you actually done yourself probably more harm than good, to be honest. Because not only you're depleted in vitamin and minerals, you're giving yourself crap food as well. I agree.
Let me tell you a story, right, about going to the gym and it not meaning anything.
Yeah.
Back in, I think, 2011, I think I got the dates right on this one, but it might be 2009. It was when the Lions tour, so Rugby Union Lions tour, was on. I can't remember where they were, but I didn't have Sky at the time, so I couldn't watch the game.
Right.
So I remember go into the gym, right, and sitting on a bike. This is pre in triathlon days.
Yeah.
Sitting on a bike for 2 hours just so I
Right.
could watch the game. And I may as well have just sat at home and
Yeah.
used my gym membership to pay for Sky Sports for that particular month, because it meant nothing. I sat there, I just turned my legs. There was hardly any probably elevated heart rate, but for 2 hours, you know, and I've learned a lot since then. And triathlon's taught me quite a lot, that every session counts. And when you're training for something, especially the longer distance triathlon, which, you've got to put the effort in, you've got to put the time in.
Yeah.
It's a juggle between that and personal life. And for
Absolutely.
me, I'm at not a crossroads. I'm at a point in my life. I'm not quite yet 40. I'm 40 in 2 months' time.
Okay.
I'm almost there. But I have two young children. I have
Yeah.
a 10-month-old and I have a 2.5-year-old.
Okay.
So my my life evolves around them, and
Yeah.
I can't be selfish anymore where I go out and I have a 5-hour bike ride and then I have to sit on the sofa for an hour to rest afterwards. So it's all about being smart, and it's all about getting the most out of the time that you do have. And that's the approach that I'm coming from. And you're right,
Yeah.
the gym doesn't need to be an hour, and it doesn't need to be in the gym either.
No.
You can do strength and conditioning work anywhere.
You can. Yeah. And the biggest resistance that you can use is your own body weight against you. So I don't advocate anybody using any equipment, because more often than not, and you tell me what you think on this, when you see people in the gym using equipment, 9 times out of 10, they've got the wrong form. And if you've got the wrong form, particularly at our age, when you get an injury, that can be quite an impactful injury. And we want to stay away from injury. But just to come back to your point on the guilt side of it, because this is something that I see a lot. So guys have a family, as you quite rightly say, they are the most important thing. That's why you have a family, right? There's no point in you having a family if they're not your most important thing. And particularly kids at young ages, the ages that your kids are at, they're great ages. They're amazing ages, because their little characters are developing. So you want to be around for that, right? However, what I don't agree with is this fact that you're selfish if you're exercising, because consider this side of it. If you don't exercise, I class that as being inconsiderate, because you're not going to be in the best shape for your kids. Therefore, you're potentially not going to be able to have the energy to run around with them. Yeah. Now, the other side to it is when you're talking about triathlon, yes, the 3 disciplines, I think they do take time, and you have to be smart with your time. But I've always been of the opinion that, you've got 24 hours in a day. So when my kids were younger, they're a lot older now. They're 10 and 13. But when I first started, they were like 5 and 8. So like you, I don't want to be away from them for hours. So I would get up at 5 in the morning, do my sessions before they even woke up, so that we could spend the rest of the day as a family together. So I think there's 2 sides to it, really. But I do agree with you, Andrew. I think, come 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, you say to the wife, great, I'm going out for a 3-hour cycle now. That's just not going to go down very well.
No, and I don't do that anymore. Because I last did an Ironman in 2016. So right. I working this out, obviously, earlier before we came on the call. That was 5 years ago. It's a big shock, that it's been that long. I was supposed to do one in 2019, but postponed it for a year, and then injury happened and whatever, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But I'm very fortunate that my other half is a runner.
Okay.
And she's part of a running club, so we can sort of say, you have your time, I have my time, then we have the family time. But back in the day, it was just her and my time, and you could play around with that. With the kids, it's a little bit different, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. And I've made a conscious effort now that I probably won't do Ironman for a couple of years, just so the kids are a little bit older, they're a little bit easier to manage when there's just one of you, and you're not carrying one around while the other one's running around your feet. But the good thing about triathlon is it gives you options. You don't need to do an Ironman, and again, this is what we say on the podcast and through Life of Tri. People sometimes automatically think you have to do something ridiculous like an Ironman, and you don't. And I'll hold my hands up. I was one of these individuals who signed up for an Ironman without doing a triathlon before. And my wife said to me, "Don't you think you better do something shorter in distance first?"
Yeah.
So I did a half Ironman as my first one. Yeah. Which again, I don't advocate. Dip your toe in the water and do a shorter distance. See if you like it. And again, this is where I suppose Life of Tri evolved from. That the mistakes that I was making, I just want to make people aware of them. I don't want to say to them, "Don't do this," because I did it and it was wrong. I just want to make people aware of it. And if you're going to do something like an Ironman, which you spend X amount of money on, 400, 500 pounds easily.
Yeah.
That's without all the equipment. To then go and do it as your first race and then not understand something like transition.
Yeah.
And because we often talk about swim, bike and run, but there's so many other disciplines to understand. There's there's transition, there's nutrition, there's hydration. And just understanding things like how a bike works. So if your chain comes off, you can slip it back on. Those sort of things. But so often what I say to people is try and do a couple of shorter distances first before you build up. And okay, that might not be for everyone. And I think you've got to understand why people do a triathlon as well. And I think it comes from two camps, right? Of maybe three. You see other people in the sport and you want the social aspect, and that's the vehicle for the social aspect. There's the people that want to be healthy, and that's their chosen sport or activity at the time. And there's a third group, I think, and those who just want a challenge. And they're always looking for the next thing. And whether that's climbing the highest peaks within the UK, whether that's doing an Ironman, whether that's doing a marathon, ultra marathon, whatever, the basis behind it, I think, is still the same, and the mindset is still the same. And that's why we exist, I suppose, is just to try and say to people, these are the scenarios, these are what other people have said to us. This is my experience. Now you've got some information. Make a choice for you.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there's a few things that you raised there, particularly around the distances. So I'll give you my side of it, actually, because like I said, I got the invitation to do the sprint in Blenheim, and that was it. That was only ever going to be, I just wanted to do a triathlon. That was it. So I had no grand designs of doing a half Ironman, an Ironman. People in the office would talk to me about half Ironman, and I was like, I'm not doing that. Forget that. And what happens is, I think that around mindset, we put these kind of ceilings and these limitations on ourselves. And what you kind of realize from doing this sport, and I guess other endurance sports really, is that the human body is just incredible. The limiting factor, in actual fact, is our mindset. And that prevents us from finishing, from even attempting stuff in the first place. So I think the other discipline is a huge mindset side of it. We can do whatever we tell ourselves that we can or can't do, right? And so I think there's that element of it really. But I agree. I think people need to experience, because the whole event of doing these three sports in one is a discipline in itself. Like you say, open water swimming is a different ball game. So this is something that I think is worth talking about as well, is that I've been to many open water lakes where you get confident, good, confident pool swimmers who jump into a lake and absolutely freak out. And they freak out because they can't see, when you're swimming in the pool, you see the black lines and you see the nice tiled floor. Immediately, when you're looking down, you see a load of weeds, potentially some fish and all the rest of it. And people get really freaked out by that. And And I think what freaks them out more is the fact they've got freaked out because they didn't assume or didn't realize what they'd be looking at when they looked in the water. The other side of it as well is the water temperature. And so your whole breathing has to change. And you don't get that in pool because generally a pool's between 27 to 29 degrees, which feels cold. But when you're getting in a lake that's 15 degrees, believe me, even with a wetsuit on, it takes your breath away. You get a cold head. So there's lots of other things to consider on the thing.
That's such a great topic, though, because I've done a podcast on this actually, but open water swimming. So my local Ironman race, let's put it that way, is Ironman Wales, right? And it's a sea swim. Yeah. And so many people swim in a pool, train for 9 months, 12 months, however long they train, to then come to the sea swim and either haven't tested the wetsuit out in open water, or have had very little exposure to it. And it's a totally different ball game. A lake swim is a step up from a pool swim. Yeah. But something like a river swim or a sea swim is a step up again because you're fighting currents, you tides and waves. My first Ironman Wales was 2014. It's notorious for the sea being really bad. So literally, I was swimming out. I would come over the top of the wave, and as my stroke came over, there was no water there because the waves were so high. We got back to transition. There was people being sick left, right, and centre. It felt like a little bit like a war zone, like a hospital tent. And there was people dropping out. And I was trying to encourage this guy next to me, saying, you've nothing can be as difficult as what we've just gone through, and you've done it. Yeah. And he was like, "Yeah, that's me done." I've also got a mate who I was training with Ironman to Wales 2016 for. Yeah. And again, very confident pool swimmer, no problem at all. I took him down to a 50-meter pool in Cardiff so he could test his wetsuit out, cold water pool as well. And he just freaked out. Couldn't get used to the wetsuit being around him. Really tight fitted on him. Don't get me wrong, he tried it on in the shop, he tried it on in the house, no problem at all. Put him into a scenario where he then needs to swim 50 meters, which he'd never done previously. Yeah. So all of a sudden he hasn't got this wall to sort of have a rest on and bounce back off. And after the session, he was almost quitting triathlon. And, until we sort of talked him down and just said, look, this takes time. You can't just expect everything to be amazing the first time. And the next session we got him back in the pool in the wetsuit and he was like a fish. And thankfully.
So I think there's quite a few things we can pick out of what you just said, funnily enough. And I think that the one thing is for people listening is not for this to put them off, right? And all of the things that you've just talked about there are all valid, but a lot of people might not even go through that. It's just to be aware of, right? So it's a case of just accepting that it's almost like a little bit of an unknown, right? So yes, you might be a swimmer, you might not be an open water swimmer. And like you say, Ironman Wales is notorious for having huge choppy waves. And so a sea swim's even more. So it's if you're listening to this and you're considering, I fancy doing a triathlon. Us men like to go big, right? It's ego, it's all the rest of it. Yeah, I can do an Ironman. Well, I'm fit. No, just step it back. Like you say, either do a super sprint or do a sprint as your first triathlon. Do it in a nice lake, open water lake before you go to a sea swim. And it's just about understanding that, the achievement of your ultimate goal, whether that's an Ironman or whatever, it's not necessarily linear. And so you might have to go through a process of a couple of years. And I've been ridiculed on forums when I've said this, particularly Ironman forums, of people going in there and saying, "No, you only need to train 6 hours a week. I did a 9-hour triathlon and Ironman." I was like, yeah, but where have you started from? Yeah. You might already be a runner, a swimmer, and a cyclist. So it's about understanding you as an individual where you're starting from, understanding your capabilities in the 3 disciplines, and then just choosing your event accordingly. And like you say, don't book an Ironman and then just go and have to train hell for leather for one. I definitely would take it one step at a time, because like you said before as well, Andrew, people might not like it. They might like an individual. So here's the thing. I couldn't stand the thought of running a marathon, but I can do a marathon at the end of an Ironman.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know why that is. But I just couldn't think, I don't know what it is. Whether it's, for me, triathlon works because it's the variety. I like the variety of swim, bike, run. But I couldn't just go out for weeks and weeks and weeks to train for a marathon. I'd get bored.
Well, for years, my marathon PB was my Ironman marathon, because I'd never done a marathon outside of it.
Yeah.
And exactly for that mindset, that I'll happily run 26.2 miles at the end of an Ironman through all the amazing crowds and things like that. But
yeah,
for years I just couldn't get past only just running, and it's fine. I do it now, but it's totally going back to the swimming element as well. We have quite a lot of people come and ask us about the swim element, and I think it's the one discipline that scares people the most.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, everyone is different, but it's probably the most that we get questions about. Do I have to swim in the sea? Do I have to wear a wetsuit? Do I have to do Ironman? That's and the answer is no, and we've touched upon it already. There are so many races out there. Okay, you may have to travel a little bit further in distance. There's plenty of pool swims. There's plenty of lake swims where you won't get a tide. I remember doing the Cotswolds 113, which is a half Ironman, years ago, and the lake at one point got so low in volume that there was one element that people had to walk it and wade through the water. It was unbelievable. I was swimming along, my hands were like dragging along the bottom, and then all of a sudden this guy sort of walks past me in the water. But it's just to say that the joy of triathlon is the variety and the choice that you have. These days there are so many different races, and the other thing that we say to people, or that I say to people, is if you don't like the swim element, try a duathlon, a run bike run. If you are not a fan of the cycling element, do an aquathon. I know a cracking aquathon in Monmouthshire, which is a river swim. And the nice thing about it, you come down, you go up the river and then you come back down. But brilliant. There's so much variety out there.
There is, and I think, like you said, that's becoming more popular now. These the Othello, like the swim races where you're swimming between like little islands over distance, has become very popular. So there is, like you say, if there's a particular discipline that you don't like, there are lots of other events that you can do out there. And I think that, to come back to the swim, what I believe, the swim is the hardest, but actually the swim is the one discipline where, it's not the discipline where you can make up a lot of time. You can be a good swimmer, you can be an okay swimmer, and your swim times won't necessarily be hugely different over, a 750 or a 1.5K swim. Where you really make time up, if time is a focus for you, is on the bike. You'll make the time up on the bike all day long, whether that's sprint or whether that's Ironman. So that's. So I think we're kind of darting around a little bit here, but I think, mindset is key. Finding the disciplines that work, and just when if it's your first event, just your aim, I believe your aim just needs to be just to finish. Doesn't matter what time it is in, just finish the event, but also enjoy it as well. And this is another thing I want to touch on, because I, coming back to the gym scenario, so many people want to get fit and healthy, but they go to the gym and they absolutely hate it. Don't go. You know, there's so many things that you can do that don't need to go to a gym, that you don't need a membership, you know, that you can find that you can enjoy. I mean, I've recently got into a lot of functional fitness, functional movement, calisthenics, and things like that. Because the other thing that I think is important is that as you age, your mobility is more limited because of the way that you've grown up, either sitting at a desk or anything else like that. Your flexibility is far reduced to how it used to be. So doing things like that can really, really help your performance in triathlon, because it means you can run more efficiently, you can swim more efficiently, you can be on the bike in the right position for longer. So you're more aero. So there's just so many things that you can do now, I think, to kind of aid that. And you know, I'm going on a little bit of a rant here, but you know, it's not just about swim, bike, run. It's not just about smashing out the distances, because they're junk miles. You know, you need to be really smart about your training, and the functional fitness and the strength work is as key as doing a swim, bike, run.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you know, like I said, I'm almost hitting 40 myself, and I'm finding that definitely range of movement is probably different to when I first got into the sport. Sitting at a desk all day does not help me at
No.
all, and that's you know, even with the standing desk that I now use in work, it's not great. And I, all of a sudden now, is my training is tweaking in the sense of, rather than spending X amount of hours on the bike, maybe one less hour,
Yeah.
I'm throwing in some sort of body movement function, improvement, yoga, Pilates, whatever you decide
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
do as you watch a bloody Joe Wicks video on YouTube if you have to. You know, I don't really,
Yeah.
whatever works for you, and that's the important element, is finding something what works for you. Interestingly, I've got neighbours who a couple of years ago I helped through with Couch to 5K,
Right.
and it's funny that they hated every minute of it. And at the end, I said, "Look, we tried it, didn't enjoy it. Find something else that you like." Because they
Yeah.
kept saying to me, "Oh, you know, I want to start running again, but I don't really enjoy it." I was like, "Don't do it then."
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
they love walking, and if that's what they want to do, brilliant. Go for long walks every evening. You know, and just enjoy it. You find something you enjoy.
Yeah, and it is about that movement, and this is a funny thing, right? Walking is highly underestimated. If we're thinking about fat loss, weight loss, body composition, it's very valuable. If you're doing 15,000 steps a day, which is a lot, but it's doable, your body as you're walking will be accessing its fat as fuel, right? So it'll be using that fuel source in the body. So if you want to burn fat, go on a massively long walk. It's low impact. It's nice, particularly this time of year. Yeah, it's accessible, you know, and you can walk and talk as you're going along. You can have, I often go out on calls walking, because I get my steps in and I have calls. I'm outside, you're getting fresh air. So yeah, I think that's really key for people to kind of recognize, and it does have an impact. You know, it does really help for movement and weight.
One other question I want to ask, and I'm not going to ask you yet, but I'm just going to touch on one thing that you said earlier, and that's the finish line for when you finished your first triathlon. I had exactly the same moment the first time I finished an Ironman.
Yeah.
And I done, and it's not just within triathlon, I find this within running races as well. That red carpet, let's call it that finish line, and it could be 3 people there, or there could be 300 people there.
Yeah.
I get such a rush from that.
Yeah.
So that moment where you run up, you cross the line, you think, yes, I bloody did it.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing feeling. And oh yeah, again, people often say to me, "Oh, I couldn't do an Ironman." That's fine, but try one of the shorter distances then. And I generally think that you'll have the same rush, because
Yeah.
that emotion of, I have trained bloody hard to get to this point, and I always say that the event itself is the crowning point, right?
It is, yeah.
It's the icing on the cake, because the hard work has been done before.
Yeah.
You should be at a point, hopefully, if your training's gone well, that you are fit enough to be able to complete that event.
Yeah.
So you get to it, and it's just that build up of emotion that you have worked so hard to get where you are, to complete something and accomplish it. And
Yeah.
hats off to anyone who does anything from 1 mile race to 5K to 10K. It doesn't matter.
Exactly.
It's that I've set the goal, I've prepared, I've planned, I've done the preparation, I've done the training, and now I've completed it.
Yeah. And I think all too often, this is a human trait that this trait of comparison. Well, my mate's done that, so I need to do that. No, the challenge is between you and whatever event it is you're doing. And the other thing about it, which is a kind of an aside, which people may be not thinking about, and that is, particularly with our children, right? We want our children, we like to kind of educate our children and show them things, and we want them to grow up in a certain way, right? There is no better way than showing your children what to do than to do it yourself. So my boys have come along to a few events that I've done, and I'm in no way I believe that I should just show them these things and then they can make their own choices. But both of them have done scootathlons, they've done mini triathlons, not because I've pushed them, but because they've seen dad doing it and then they want to give it a go. And so I believe there's no better way than to show to get your children involved than to show them how to do it, and then they'll naturally want to get involved. Whether they continue with it or not is irrelevant, right? But you've shown them another opportunity that they could pursue if they wanted to. And I think that's the benefits of it. And, the event day as well, your families go through all of this training with you, good, bad, ups, downs, all the rest of it. So the day that you have the event, to have your family there at the finish line, there's no better feeling than that. Them clapping you across as you come across the finish line, them seeing the achievement you've made, the sense of achievement. There's so many plus points to it. It's just, I think that's why I love it.
And all of these events I go to, you'll always see a handful of people complete it, and then 9 times out of, well, not 9 times out of 10, but a large time you see the mum or the dad who's just completed it, and their child is wearing the medal.
Yeah.
And I love that. Again, there are times where triathlon could be such a lonely sport if you're training on your own, but for a large proportion as well, it can be such a family atmosphere. Not just you a family, but the community around it as well. And fortunately, there's always someone who is willing to give their time and advice within the sport. Unfortunately, that's not always the best advice as well to give. And then it comes back to what we were saying. I prefer to give people information, but say to them, this is your choice and your decision on what you do with it, because some of it will be my experiences and some of it will be slightly biased, but at least you can make an informed decision if you have some of the information in front of you.
Yeah, I agree. But also what I would like to say is don't overanalyze it. We love overanalyzing stuff, men particularly. And I would just say, set yourself that first target. Coming back to what we said before we started recording about all the gear, all the nutrition and all the rest, you can get down a rabbit hole in all number of those different things. Your main objective is enjoy it and finish it. Yeah. You can do it. I've seen people do, particularly Blenheim, because it's short course. I've seen people do it on all number of different bikes, but instantly us men use it as an excuse to get sign off from the wife that we won't go and buy a 2-3 grand bike. You don't actually have to do that. And funnily enough, you can actually go and buy some very, very good second-hand bikes.
We say this on the channel all the time, right? Because we get the question, isn't triathlon expensive? It can be expensive, but that's up to you.
Yeah.
So you can use what you already have. So if you're on an existing bike, it could be a mountain bike, it could be a hybrid.
Yeah.
I don't know. It could be a penny farthing for all I know.
Yeah.
But in theory, you can use it, especially for the shorter distances. Maybe longer distance, you may want to consider something else. there's also the option then of either hiring or buying second hand. So you can hire a wetsuit, no problem at all. 50, 60 quid for this for a season or an event, sorry. And yeah, buy second hand. My first road bike was a second hand bike from eBay. It cost me 400 quid. So it's 400, it's not still a lot of money sort of thing. But that's not to say it didn't do me a job. It got me around a half Ironman and an Ironman, and to this day I still have that bike and I love it.
Yeah,
it's just what I learned on, and I just got comfortable with it, and it's my winter bike now, so I really look forward to winter rides.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, like we said about not liking it earlier. Imagine the huge pressure if you then actually do this and you actually hate it, and you've gone and spent 2-3 grand on a bike, 500 quid on a wetsuit, and all the rest of it, tri-suits, the rest of it that comes with it. Just start off small, and if you absolutely love it, just keep upgrading.
And that's why Facebook Marketplace at the end of a season with bargains to be had.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I love Facebook Marketplace. Yeah, no, it's very, very good. I agree.
So the final thing I wanted to ask you, because you've mentioned it a couple of times, is around nutrition, and we have touched on some barriers into the sport and what people need to consider. But the one thing I think people fall down on is nutrition. Not necessarily race nutrition. I'm not talking about that now. I'm talking about their day-to-day life nutrition.
Yeah. This is a huge topic for me personally, and one which outside of triathlon as well, we get hugely wrong. And there's this, if we're talking in the context of training for a triathlon, there's this misnomer that we need to stuff ourselves full of food in terms of volume and food in terms of carbohydrate, and we don't, quite simply. The Western diet has evolved in such that it is predominantly carbohydrate based, but we haven't evolved with the diet. And what I mean by that is we are not moving as much as we would need to in order for the body to be able to deal with the amount of carbohydrates we're giving it. And so portion sizes is another one. I remember being at a training camp a couple of years ago in Spain, and there was a load of other English clubs there. And there was this one particular guy, and he sticks in my mind. He was a big guy. He's probably like me in terms of height, about 6'3", but he must have been double my weight. And every single night at the end of this training camp, his plates would be piled. And the common thing is like, well, I'm a big guy, so I need a lot of food. No, you don't. You absolutely don't. You don't need massive portion sizes. Your body can't deal with it all. That's the problem. If you understand metabolism and the way the body deals with the food and the digestive system, the way it deals with it, the body can't deal with massive loads of food that we give it, carbohydrate based and all the rest of it. Now, I could go off on a tangent around blood sugar, type 2 diabetes, but I won't. But I think in its very basic form, you don't need to eat huge amounts. You need to be very clever with your diet, and you need to have the 3 main macronutrients, which is protein, carbohydrates, and fats. Over the last 2 years, have become more fat adapted. And what that means is, for people that don't necessarily understand that, is the body has 2 primary fuel systems, which is glycogen, which comes from carbohydrates, which is stored in the muscles, and then fats, which is stored in our fat cells. Now, I've become more fat adapted. What that means is I'm able to train when my body's accessing fat as fuel and not just carbohydrates. What that means is I don't need to ingest so many carbohydrates. And here's the thing. From glycogen in the muscles, the body stores the equivalent of 2,000 calories, okay? Which over a long course, it will get depleted and you will have to replace. With fats, though, we have an unlimited fuel source. So we have the equivalent of over 40,000 calories in fat as fuel in the body. So being very clever with your diet is very, very important. and not overeating, eating timely as well. So eating when you've trained, not being too rigid with your food. At a very basic level, just don't eat processed foods. Eat, create your food from raw ingredients, which is very, very basic, very, very simple, and actually cheaper. So yeah, I mean, this is a whole podcast on its own, if I'm honest. And then, if we talk about race nutrition as well, I'm going to put this out there. I am hugely against gels in a big way, because they are very, very detrimental to our gut. And the manufactured sugars that hit our gut. Now, people might be listening to this and thinking, well, we need gels. If your body's got the right nutrition pre-race, you don't need as many gels as you think you do. And if you have become more fat adapted, you won't need as many of the sugars that convert into carbohydrates anyway. So yeah, I think there are a lot of people in the sport of triathlon who are type 2 diabetic as well. And that is born out of diet. So yeah, I think you have to be very clever with your nutrition, but it doesn't have to be complicated.
Apologies. Yeah, one thing we promote on the channel is sort of eating from scratch. Just less processed. I'm not a nutritionist, and I don't claim to be any sort of expert in it, but just try and eat less processed, and that's what we try and say. And gels are included in that. If you're the type of person that we generally believe, if you are the type of person that you want to use gels, okay, that's up to you. But all I'm saying is there's plenty of people out there who will cycle with bananas. I've seen bananas duct taped around the drop handles of a bike. It's the most ingenious place I've ever seen bananas. I had a mate who did Ironman years ago on jam sandwiches, and it's just to show that there's options, and you don't, just because the person next to you is using gels.
No, exactly. And I see way too many of this. I've recently joined a cycling club, and we go out for a 2.5 hour ride on a Saturday. I'll just have electrolytes. That's all I will have. I won't have any gel. But you'll see guys, every time we stop, they'll smash a gel, and it's just so detrimental to your gut, and having leaky gut and gut health. It's just really, we don't need it. The muscles have enough glycogen for us to withstand an 1.5 hours of high intensity work before we're depleted. And you'll know when you're depleted because you'll hit the wall and you won't be able to go any further.
And people often say that to us as well, what do I need to take on a nutrition wise on a certain length of race? And we say, well, really, realistically, you don't need to take anything for up to about 90 minutes. You can probably get around a race on that. Beyond that, you might need to consider what your race plan is, but again, don't overcomplicate it.
And the other thing is test it in training, see how you feel. I remember in my early days when I was back in the gel camp, I'd go out for an hour ride and I'd smash 2 gels. I'd come back and I was in bits because it spiked my blood sugar so much that the body couldn't produce enough insulin to deal with it. And I was literally wiped out. So yeah, it can be dodgy if you get it wrong.
Well, let me tell you a story about my first Ironman that I will use a gel. I will admit that. But back in those days, I was like, right, what can I do that works for me? So I ended up putting 12 gels into a bottle, opened them, put them in, topped it up with a little bit of water, and that's what got me round. But Jesus Christ, I was buzzing afterwards. I finished the race, and my wife Rach said, finished the race, and I'd done it in something like 14 hours.
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh, are we just going to go back now? It's getting late. It was close to 10 o'clock at night, on midnight. Yeah, time of finishing. Went through transition, and I went, no, I want to go back out, and I want to see the finish at 12 o'clock. And I was buzzing. Yeah, I just couldn't stop. And don't get me wrong, adrenaline was high.
Yeah, of course. Well. Yeah.
but that the sugar in me must have had some sort of impact as well.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, the sugar's profound, isn't it? So was your first Ironman then Ironman Wales?
Yeah.
Wow, that is no mean feat. If anybody wants to see Ironman Wales, just go onto YouTube and have a look at the Ironman Wales swim, because it is renowned for being challenging.
It's the thing is, being from Cardiff and being in South Wales, it not that it's drummed into you, but you have a lot of exposure to it, right? And so this is the camp that I come from, and I can put money on. I'd say at least 75% of the people that do Ironman Wales are exactly the same as me. I come from a football or rugby background.
Yeah.
I played it until my 30s. My knees or some part of my body said no more.
Yeah.
I then looked for something else. I went down and saw the first Ironman Wales in 2011, got hooked. And then three years later, after mulling it over, I finally decided to do it as a challenge. And I put money on it. A lot of people are in a similar sort of mindset. But within South Wales, Ironman Wales is a huge thing. You know, there's loads of events on as well. There's an event called the Long Course, which takes in some of the Ironman Wales route, but does it over 3 days. And it's sort of ingrained into you then that this is what you should strive towards if you get into triathlon. And I think at times detrimental for some people in the sense of it puts too much pressure on them, because you say within our local area, oh, I'm going to do a triathlon, inevitably someone will ask you along the way, oh, are you going to do Ironman Wales? And you're like, whoa, I was only going to do a sprint, right? Calm down. But what I would suggest is, if you are thinking about doing a triathlon or something like that, just spikes your attention, go and watch one.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant. And what I would say is, don't go and watch Ironman Wales then, because you'll get hooked. Because have you ever gone down to Tenby to watch Ironman Wales?
I haven't, no.
All right.
I haven't.
So the day starts, obviously, 7 o'clock in the morning with the swim. And what you have is 2,000 spectators on North Beach within Tenby, and Tenby is the harbour town, which it's done in. And the beach is lower than the town, and the town is up on, let's call it a cliffside, but it's not.
Yeah.
But it's at least 150 foot up.
Yeah.
And what you have then is, as well as the 2,000 people on the beach, you probably have 5,000 plus people watching it above.
Yeah.
They play AC/DC at the beginning. They play the Welsh national anthem, and then they set off. And for more or less an hour and a half to 2 hours, it's buzzing there. Everyone comes out of the water at that point, and they're out on the bike. So Tenby as a town sort of settles down, and everyone goes, ah. They then go for their bacon sandwiches while they wait for the bikes to come back for the first loop.
Yeah.
Inevitably then, by the time that's happened, the pubs are open, so they start having their first pint. The second loops come back round. You may venture over to a couple of the points to watch the bike, but ultimately what happens is spectators get progressively more and more drunk as the day goes on. So they're either drinking more, they're eating more. But what I'm trying to get to is it's an amazing event, but that's just one event, and there's plenty out there which are an amazing atmosphere to go to. Yeah. But the danger is that you'll get hooked and you'll want to do it.
Yeah. It's and I think that's the thing, right? The adrenaline, the camaraderie, the friendliness of it, particularly for, not just the crowd, but in transition, people are so friendly. People are so willing to kind of help you out and give you support and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's the other side to it as well. It is a hugely communicative type sport. And I'd never not really been into sport until I did triathlon. And I was really quite taken aback by people saying, oh, good luck, or what you're hoping to achieve today and stuff like that. If you get goggles break, I've had guys give me a pair of goggles on the start line when I've had my goggles break, It is very, very, supportive sport, definitely.
And I found one of the best things that they've done in the last 5 to 7 years or whatever. They now put your name on your race number.
Yeah.
So you can literally run through the town, and I'll take Tembe for example. You run through the race, and in Tembe you run through the town itself, and it's a really enclosed town, which is an old walled sort of castle or something, whatever. But literally people are on you, spectating, and they're like, "Come on, Andrew, go on, you're doing well," and it does give you a bit of a lift.
It's massive. I mean, I had that back in 2019. I did Ironman Vichy in France, and that day was 38 degrees. So I was doing the run, and I came off the bike depleted, and so my marathon was shocking. I finished it, but there was a group of British guys there. They obviously had people in the race, but they kind of pitched themselves under this bridge along the river in France. And every single time somebody came through, they cheered them. But the minute somebody came through with a British flag on their name, they went ballistic. Now I finished the race at about 6 o'clock at night, and I went to a restaurant that was just up from the course. And at 9 o'clock at night, these guys were still there. They were still there, still cheering everybody on. And it's just amazing from that standpoint, really.
And I love it, and I encourage anyone just to go and watch a race in the first instance, and just see if that's something that you want to do.
Yeah, awesome.
Look, Dad, let's call it a day there. It's been lovely chatting to you, and hopefully you never know, maybe we'll do a couple more in the future if we find out the topic to discuss. But thank you very much for coming on.
No worries.